Can you really create your future out of nothing? You might be listening to this and you're 40 years old, 50 years old, you're struggling with debt, and you're thinking, Can I really get out of this? Is it really possible to build the life I want? Can I really do this? Well, today's guest emigrated to the UK from Nigeria with his mum and his family, and they built a phenomenal life out of a completely fresh start. And the concept that tomorrow is unclaimed is one that has really inspired me. So I'm super excited to share this episode with you to inspire you on your journey to build the life you really want to live. The extraordinary belongs to those that create it. Rebelling against business plans and debt, rebelling against what society expects of us to build cool businesses, make money, have fun, and do good. Let's create something extraordinary together. Welcome to the Rebel Entrepreneur. Welcome to the Rebel Entrepreneur podcast, and I have with me today special guest Ken from the Humble Penny. Welcome, Ken.
Hey, Alan, how you doing?
It's lovely to have you on the show. I've been thinking about doing this episode for a long time, especially as you've been along to a couple of the Rebel Business Schools and given talks for us, haven't you?
Yes, I absolutely love everything you do, as you know, and I
Oh, I
literally
love you too.
love, I literally love like the whole thing, and I love coming up to those events whenever I can, and I'm really honored that you actually invited me to come to them. So yeah, they were fun.
Well, you really inspired people, and I think one of the things that inspired people was like the talk you gave was about creating a blog, building a business on a blog, and you do that in your spare time. You're a family man, a parent. And how many kids do you have now, Ken?
Currently two children, although that remains
Currently two.
debatable.
And you built your blog around a full time job and two
Hmm.
kids, which I think is like people sometimes look at me and go, It's all right for you, Alan. You and Katie have decided not to have kids. Like you have
Mhm,
endless time. And that is probably true. Like we do have more
mhm,
time because we
mhm,
don't have kids, but you still manage to do it, even though you do have two kids.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I did because do you know what it is, Alan? I guess the way you I used to work at a place many years ago, and I used to have this almost this caption that said attitude changes everything. And I think the attitude you approach life with really dictates a lot of the outcome you get out of your life. And for me, I've always been very um, optimistic about life and very experimental. I really like trying stuff out. And when it came to this whole idea of blogging or YouTubing or creating an online business or all these fun things, I I got a lot of inspiration from just listening to other people. I'm very good at kind of observing and learning from others and then going away and experimenting. And so for me, I didn't want to subscribe to, oh, I'm busy, my life's very busy. I've got a busy job as a chief financial officer. I'm stacked. I've got kids. Like I can't do it. It was more of a question of how do I do it? Like these guys are doing it. How do I do it? How do I actually do it myself? How do I figure it out? Um, and that was really what bothered me, what really kept nudging me to say, well, actually, if people are doing this stuff, they figured out a way of doing it, what can I do? And I came up with an idea of um, experimenting with 2 hours a day. So I called it my 2 hour day experiment, which is we all get 24 hours. We all know that. But what if I built, carved out 2 hours per day to sew into one thing consistently for 3 years? What result might I get by doing that? That was my experiment. And
I love that.
so I basically gave myself that time. And for me, that was a period over which I said to myself, I've got 3 years to fail. So that means like, that's it. Like I've committed. Like and commitment is actually a really interesting thing because I understand commitment from the perspective of a relationship. I've been married now almost 11 years to the same woman, dare I say. and and commitment's actually a really interesting thing because I think it takes a particular type of individual to truly commit to something, whether it's a relationship or a business idea or a venture, because there's a core underlying why for the thing that drives them for wanting to do that. So anyway, that was what, at a high level, what kind of got started, pushed me to get started.
Well, I think there's some interesting things here, and one thing I really want to pick up on, because I think this is something that's made the difference for you, is it's almost a throwaway line of I wanted to do it consistently for 3 years. And I remember when I wanted to lose weight and I was listening to this book by Tim Ferriss called The 4 Hour Body, and I would listen to it and he'd say, we did this, 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 and then 6 months later, these were the results. And it was almost as if I didn't hear the 6 months later, because when I started doing it myself, I'd throw myself into it, and then 2 weeks later, I was like, nothing's happened, nothing's changed, and I'd swear lots and shout. And then Katie would say, you do realize they said 6 months later in the book, but I think it's that throwaway midline that people don't hear, that they expect results. And this is the same for all of us. I've written 3 blog articles. Why isn't it working yet? I've been healthy for 3 days. Why am I not 42 stone down? It's that piece. And you consistently for 3 years, consistently. And I think that's kind of a scary prospect, which is kind of the opposite of a mini experiment, because we talk a lot on the podcast about mini experiments. Put it out there, see if you like it, get going. But you almost did a maxi experiment, as it were.
Yeah, because I saw it as I've got 2 hours a day. Okay. And the thing about having limited resources or limited time is that you have to become quite resourceful about what you do with those limited resources. And so for me, I knew that I couldn't compete with a person who had 20 hours a week working on the same thing I was working on. So the question then was, what would move the needle the most in the thing I'm trying to create so that I could focus on it with my 2 hours a day? That was literally my way of looking at it. But then I also knew, given the nature of the beast, as it were, when you create an online business, the miracle does not happen overnight. It takes a while to build an audience, takes a while to build an email list, takes a while to learn the craft of writing, it takes a while to build personal confidence. You gotta remember, the reason why I went writing first was because I always had this hang up, Alan, because I was not very good at my English when I was at school. I got a C in my English GCSE. And so for me, this writing thing was actually about, how can I prove that I can actually be good at writing something that someone might read and say, oh, okay, I think that's actually quite interesting. I enjoyed reading that. So for me, it was that 3 years was about becoming something else, becoming someone else. I wanted to use that time to truly invest in who I was and who I wanted to become, aside from who my traditional life was, which is that I've been working finance, I've been acing it, getting promotions, getting pay rises, all these things. But then that pathway was just the traditional path. I could stay there and keep getting paid, but I felt something else was missing. And so this alternative path was, for me, was necessary to become who I've become today on my journey so far.
I have so many questions. So many questions. Something else was missing. What was that thing that was missing between the finance world and what you created? Because you basically had a side hustle for 3 years.
Yes.
And eventually dropped off. And I think before you answer that question, the missing piece, just so people can find you, because they might actually want to look up your blog as they listen to this, or the YouTube channel. What do they type into Google to find you, Ken?
Just type in The Humble Penny. So our blog is at thehumblepenny.com, and the YouTube channel, as well as our Instagram and all those things, are also at The Humble Penny. So you can find them all by the same keyword, as it were.
Cool. So, what was missing that you weren't getting in the finance world?
So what was missing, Alan, was fulfillment. I was not fulfilled in my job. I was being paid really well. I was good at what I was doing. But you know how, like, I felt like I was living an autopilot life. You know, when you're in cruise
Mm.
control, you're driving a car, you put a car in cruise control, for example, or whatever. I felt like a lot of my life was, although I was progressing and like seeking the next thing in that path, I felt like it was, I'd cruised into that career path. And I felt like for me in my personal life, there was a gap. I felt like I wanted to do something else. I could be doing so much more in the world. I felt like when I looked around me, specifically, when I looked around me, I saw a lot of people who were not doing very well financially. But when I looked around my job where I worked in venture capital, it was all about like people who were either millionaires or billionaires and those sort of things. Those were the ideal customer, as it were. Yeah, so there's a huge like void. I'm like, wait a sec. I've got people WhatsApping me going, can I please have £100? Or can I like there's like something wrong here. There's a mismatch between where I'm placing my attention and my time and where I see like the need. Like there are people out there just in debt and like just struggling. I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, am I afraid to do what I know I need to do, which is to go and actually try and help with the skills that I've acquired over time to help people? Am I afraid of doing that by actually staying in my job, and staying in the job knowing I was actually not really enjoying what I was doing any longer? I didn't really see much of a future there. So doing the blog was almost my safe way into what my life would become, basically.
Because you can kind of put it out there and see what happens, can't you? It's like a
Yeah,
safer mini experiment. You
yeah,
put it out there, you see if people respond, and no one responds to the first few posts. Like maybe your mum, but that's about it. And then you
yeah,
start to promote it, and it starts to build,
yeah.
and
It
then you go
gathers
from
some
there. But it is a long
momentum and stuff.
journey.
Yeah. Oh, it's a long journey. I do not even want to give anyone the wrong impression that any of this is easy by any stretch of the imagination. Yes, writing, you can get it done, but there's a science, there's an art to all this stuff, and there's that element of also risk taking and experimenting and just trying various things to see what works. And I hope we can talk a bit about that because that's kind of what's led me in different pathways, like starting a YouTube channel. And again, it's this experimental element of like trying to see what would work and you know what outcome we might get.
So before we get on to the experimental level, I did have a question. I
Hmm.
There was a point where you went full time on
Yes.
your blog and things.
Mhm.
Like, what percentage of the way were you to financial independence
Oh, no, no. We
before you
were
dived?
we were actually financially independent even before I started the blog.
Oh
So
wow.
in 2017, oh yeah, but I still had my job, because when you earn a good six-figure income, it's hard to let go of it. Yeah, because just think about it, like, and this is something we don't often talk about a lot. In that, um, it's hard to uh, it's hard to basically live something you've done for 15 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
And something you've built up. And, it's the only skill I had. Well, I say it's the only skill. It's like my area of expertise. I was a trained chartered accountant. I'd been working in finance and investment business for years. And it's hard to let that go, even though you've been managing your own personal finances and doing really a good job of it. Letting go was a whole different thing because you become accustomed to a particular lifestyle. And that money has like places it goes. It pays for annual holiday. It pays for various things. So you'd become quite used to doing that. So for me, letting go was the hardest thing. There was a much bigger carrot that I needed to shake off in order to actually let that happen. But COVID was what presented the opportunity. It was actually COVID that that kind of
Mm.
pushed me over the edge, as it were.
How this is going to be a weird question. How did COVID push you over the edge?
So when the pandemic happened in say Feb 2020, March 2020, um, everything collided. So for me, the world was almost coming to an end in that like homeschooling became like a real difficult thing to do. So
Yes.
imagine like I'm in this room right now where I'm at and I'm trying to work. My kids are in here, they're demanding various things, their teachers want them to do various things. So basically work became super, super stressful, extremely stressful and demanding because you're now working remotely. You normally have office meetings, but now everyone's trying to speak on Zoom or whichever online platform and trying to make things happen. Then on top of that, I started struggling with my mental health. I started struggling with just work stress. So many things started to pile on. And on top of that, the humble penny was taking off with many things we were doing. There was demand for me to go and speak here, come on this interview, come on this, come on that. I basically felt like I personally was falling apart. So my wife said to me, like, not being funny, for the last decade, we've been working towards us getting to a place financially where we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. Isn't this why we've been working towards doing this for so long? Why don't we actually focus on this thing properly and actually just do it? And that was really the beginning. That was it. This is where I went and had a conversation with my employer at the time and came to a good arrangement. And that became the beginning. The 14th of April 2020 was really the date when I took that leap, went for that long walk for 2 hours and said to myself, oh my God, like I'm actually doing this. And the fear kind of kicked in.
It's interesting, isn't it? I always think that actually it takes pain in our lives to shift us. And it shouldn't, but it kind of does. Like it takes being fired, it takes a pandemic, it takes something big happen to shift us to
Mhm,
make things happen. And I've been saying to
mhm,
people recently, like, we don't have to wait for that to happen. We can decide to
mhm.
do it earlier. Like, no matter what
Yes.
it is, we can do that. But
Mhm.
that pain motivates us. And it sounds like you had a huge dose of pain that made
Mm.
you change your world.
I always look at it as a point of no return event. And I've got many of them. Many. For example, 2009, newly qualified accountant got made redundant straight away.
Oh,
Global financial crisis. For me, that was a point of no return. Another point of no return event was sitting with my boss in a job back in, I think, 2016 or whenever, in a room. And she literally said to me, listen, if you don't do what I tell you right now, your entire job is in my hands. I'm in complete control of you.
wow.
And when you hear stuff like that from your own boss, you realize that, you know what? Thank goodness I've been kind of working and kind of preparing a bit of a plan for myself because, like, the last thing you want is someone kind of switching your career off, switching your job off because they can, because it's within their power to be able to do that. The others are my journey. I'm a first generation immigrant to this country, struggling in this country to get my papers, to get my rights in this country, to operate like everybody else. I haven't always been a British citizen. It's a hustle to kind of get to that place where you're able to say you are. And so for me, again, that's another point of no return because like it's been a huge driver for me. Trying to make it,
Mm.
trying to find a way to kind of um, I guess catch up, as it were, and so on.
So, first generation immigrant, when did you come to the UK?
Mhm.
Where did your parents emigrate? Where did you come from? When did you come?
So I came to the UK at the age of 14 in 1998. It was the summer of
Okay.
1998, and I moved here from Lagos in Nigeria with my siblings and my mum. My dad was already in the UK. He'd been here a few years before, about 4 or 5 years before that, to go, here to kind of scope out, see what life's like, and that sort of stuff. And so we moved here to join my dad and kind of reunite. As a teenager, living without your dad, living with just your mum as a single parent is a difficult thing. So for me, reuniting with my dad was actually a pretty big deal. Starting life, but it was a huge culture shock. You're in a new country, you're in a different environment, new culture, new everything basically. Like no friends. You're starting again. And for me, that was year 11. Like imagine what it's like,
Wow.
Alan. You will know starting new life in year 11, like the last year of your um, of your secondary school, is when you show up and you're starting with a strong African accent, and all those things. So for me, it was bullying. It was being pushed around. It was all those things that you'd expect because like you're fresh, you're freshy. People call you all these names, and on top of that, because I didn't have the rights, like when you're new to a country, you don't have like you can't just go and claim benefits, you can't just go and get on the NHS. Like I didn't have all those things. So it meant that like my personality was shaped a lot from that stage of my life. Like I became very, very, very very quiet individual. Like I just minded my own business a lot whilst trying to figure life out and trying to figure like how to navigate this country and how to win in this place. Like how do people make it? So for me, a lot of my like desire to kind of want to create the life I love and create a life for my family has actually come from just always remembering like what we've gone through in this country. Like, my parents doing cleaning jobs, everybody work doing anything. And these are not jobs where you get pay slips, but jobs basically where you basically make like 80 quid or whatever, and you use that to pay for your food and stuff. So for me, a lot of that desire, even today, because like you know I essentially got wired up from those experiences. So even today, when I think, oh wow, like we've progressed a fair bit since then, um, I still think back to those days, And when I look at our children, they're far more like, I guess, far more privileged now compared to, kind of where I came from. It's now I guess what I'm trying to do now is to kind of teach them how to really appreciate the really small things, because like when you don't have, it's very difficult. It's actually very difficult when you don't have money or have a job or stuff like that. So yeah.
So you moved to the UK
Mm.
with a huge culture shock because let's be honest, British people are a little bit weird.
Yeah.
You
Let's
had a
just say
strong
they're different.
accent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I feel like Nigeria and British culture are some of the most opposite in a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
ways.
Quite extreme. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I think like you had this thing that you became quiet at school.
Mm.
Was that a protection thing about not standing
Yes.
out and avoiding the
Correct.
bullying?
Absolutely. 100%. I stopped speaking. I couldn't speak to girls, for example, like, and I couldn't even speak to the guys because the guys would pick on me. I try and speak to girls and girls would laugh at me. So it was like, when you just feel like you're just alone,
Yes.
and for me and my family, I've got a brother, but he's my, like, he's not my actually my uncle, but he's a year older than me. So my parents took him on as like one of my siblings. So he's my
Oh,
brother
wow.
since like childhood. So, but theoretically, like properly, I'm the firstborn child of my parents. I'm the only son. So I had from African culture perspective, I have a lot of responsibility. So imagine like at that stage of my life, struggling and trying to navigate stuff, but also having my sisters looking up to me to show them like how do we navigate this country and stuff like that. It's actually a really, really difficult time, whilst also the pressure of trying to do your GCSEs, I was in year 11. So yeah, so it was a very interesting stage of my life, put it that way, um it was just so interesting, even small things like the weather, like I've been, I'm born and bred, like I play football a lot as a child on the streets, but it's very different here. Like you couldn't just like, I couldn't play football barefooted on the street anymore. It was just different, like just a different vibe. It's a different place, different vibe, different everything. So it's like you've been exported into a different world, and you have to find a way of either fitting in or standing out. I don't, you just have to find a way of surviving in that space and kind of thriving. But I also have to say, like, I recognize that this country was like a gold mine, because like I could see very clearly that things were very structured, very organized. There was a rule of law. There were like job centers, and like there was stuff. There's like you could do stuff, and you could actually like make it. So the
Hmm.
question was, how do I figure out how to do it? Like, what are people doing to make it, and how do I do it so I too can make it? That was really it. So the whole journey was focusing on my education, studying, trying to ace it at school, whilst also learning to be street smart and learning things from my parents and people around me and so on.
So, like, one of the things I've noticed throughout this conversation, Ken, is the questions you ask yourself. And you were talking about experimenting,
Mm.
and you said, how do I do it? And you were talking about sort of being a parent, having kids, having a full-time job, and how do I do it? I think so many times people don't ask them those questions, and they just generally focus on why they can't do it. Like, I've got kids, I've got a full-time job, I can't do it. You
Mm.
asked almost the exact opposite question, which is, how do I do it? And then you
Oh
sort
yeah.
of started asking more and more questions. And throughout, I've started writing down your questions because I love them. But how do I do it? How do I make progress? How do I build this? How do I
Mm.
experiment? And but then you started the story you just told was, how do I figure out how to make it?
Mhm.
Most people, in my experience, don't ask those positive questions. I
Mm.
struggle to when I'm in my down moments.
Mhm.
Like, if I'm down and I'm in a problem, I just end up focusing on the problem and huffing around the place
Mm.
until I get myself a bit more resourceful and ask a positive question.
Yeah.
Like, where did this come from? Were you born with the ability to ask positive questions?
No, no, no. Uh, I've just, I've over time, I've grown to develop a different mindset gradually, gradually. And one really important mindset I hope people can relate to in a way is that I believe very strongly. So today we're making this interview. It's a Wednesday, right? And to me, in my mind, tomorrow and everything that happens after tomorrow is completely unclaimed land. Nobody owns it. It's
Mm.
like imagine London with nothing built on it. So for me, I see tomorrow and everything else that's coming as like completely unclaimed. And I have the opportunity today to decide what gets built tomorrow. Okay. That's how I look at it. So that means how I look at life today really matters. What I choose to do with my money today matters. What I choose to do with my time today really matters because it effectively builds tomorrow. It effectively helps me to build on that unclaimed land tomorrow. So for me, it's not a question of like, why can't I do it and all this stuff. It's more like how do I do it? Because I know like it's everybody listening to this call, this podcast right now can create tomorrow. We're literally the only species in the world that have the possibility to create futures. Like we create anything. Human beings create, right? So for me, from whether it's your career, whether it's your relationship, whether it's your business, whether it's your health, whatever it is, we have it within our capability to change things up. And so for me, that's where that idea comes from. That's why I'm always asking these questions because I know, like, from a mindset perspective, I've already had that switch turned on. I'm constantly thinking, well, tomorrow is unclaimed. Like, I can affect tomorrow. Like, I can change things up, and that's helped me with my mindset around everything I've done so far. Even my career choices, typically, you know, before I would always think, oh, okay, so my career could go in this one direction. I'm an accountant. Yes, I've become a CFO. Oh, wow, that's great. But then I think to myself, well, actually, like, whose idea is that? Like, the whole
Mm.
future, I can shift and change it however I want. Like, why can't I go on, like, I don't know, do what I'm doing today and create on YouTube? Why can't I go and, you know, there isn't one path. There are infinite paths. There are infinite possibilities in the future that is unclaimed. So that mindset is really what is where those questions are really coming from. There's that there's deep rooted mindset, and that's just come from like my mum, for example, is huge inspiration. She's an entrepreneur. She's like, oh my god, I don't even want to get started, man. Like my mum's huge, huge inspiration. Like my dad's is huge inspiration, but my mum, oh my goodness, listen, right? Ah, when like well, anyway, this podcast could be very long if I started. But basically, a lot of my deep rooted kind of mindset shifts have come from just like really just observing people I love, really elevate and level up and push themselves outside their comfort zone to make things happen. And the more I see that, the more I surround myself with that, the more I find myself pushing myself outside my comfort zone to also make things happen and to elevate.
So, how do you think? How did your mum cope with coming to a completely new country
Hmm.
and starting with cleaning jobs?
Hmm.
Like, how did that shift and level up change over the years? Was it easy
Hmm.
for her, or did she have to fight the
Oh,
weird British culture?
okay. So this is quite an emotion. This is quite a big question, an emotional one for me because I want to just lay out, just
Mm,
paint the picture. So picture this: 1998. She was in her mid 40s. Yeah, mid 40s with 4 children. Right?
wow.
No money, no rights in a new country. Picture that. Because the reason I've painted that picture, I want people to realize that it's never too late for them. My mum's financially independent today. She's FI completely, runs her own businesses, owns properties. She's doing very well. She's in her 60s, right? So I want to just give you the timeline, right? So if anyone who's listening thinking, well, actually, how do you create possibilities in your life? I just want to lay out my mum as a case study. Okay. How did she cope? Wow. She coped by starting to adapt, first of all. She would do 3 jobs. Literally, she would have um, a job washing plates, for example. Then she would go to another one where she'd work on the checkout at a supermarket. Then she'd go and do a night job. And in a day, she might end up working about 16 to 18 hours and then come home,
Wow.
touch base, and then get back out again. All of this for cash in hand. Very work that a lot of people will not do, basically, put it that way, because people say it's quite degrading work and stuff like that. But for her, as someone who had some social status in Nigeria to move here and seeking, supposedly a much better life and all those things, it's quite a huge radical shift. Not to mention,
Yes.
it's not a kind of job, people, like the immigrant culture, like people, they look at you, they're like, oh, wow, you've made it. Like you're in England. Like, wow, like life must be good. And then she's hiding doing these jobs and,
Mm,
never telling anybody what kind of job she's doing to kind of make the money. So for her, it was a big shift. And then to add to that, when you're that age, it's actually quite hard to shift your accent. So not only are you a
yes.
black woman, but you're also African, but you also have a very strong accent. And back then, dare I say, there was no Afrobeats. There was no popular culture. Because today you look, you've got Burna Boy, you've got all these people. So Afro music, Nigerian culture, African culture is very, very popular today. But back then, it was terrible being African in the UK. Like you were called all kinds of names. So for her as a woman as well, as a woman, dare I say, it was very, very difficult. So to get out of all of that, for her, the path was entrepreneurship because she couldn't go to a job center and go and say, "Oh, can I please have a job, please?" No one will give her a job because she didn't have the documents and all those things. So for us all, and for my mum, it was all about creating value. How do I start something? She started multiple things. How do I create a business from like nothing, from the little money I've collected from my job at a cash point? She started a cleaning business. She started a recruitment business. She started various things over the years, and business became the way out. This is why, like, when you look at me now, like I've got such like for me, like entrepreneurship is like it's my thing, man. Like I'm so driven, for me, because like it's been wired into me watching my mom navigate life trying to survive basically.
Sounds. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because my initial reaction is, I'm so sorry she had a tough time and wanting to apologize for that.
No.
Because I think that whole, like, that's hideous, that stuff.
Mm,
And then my second reaction is, that helped her become who she is and helped you
yes.
become who you are.
Yes.
And like, I think when I tell people that I was bullied at school, and when I was listening to you, I'm like, oh my god, I've been through so much of what you've been through from a different angle.
Yeah.
Like mine was fat, glasses,
Hmm.
etc., etc.,
Hmm.
for years. Um, but it made me who I am today.
Hmm.
And do I want to go through it again? No. if I did, well, I wouldn't. It wouldn't be the same if I went through it again now. It wouldn't
Hmm.
stay.
Hmm.
It would just be different. Um, but those things end up making you who you are. And I
Yeah.
love the message of that she came to the UK at 40 years old, completely
Mid
starting
40s.
again, mid
Yeah.
40s. Like,
Yes.
it's unbelievable. Like, I guess I'm struggling to formulate my questions because I'm thinking,
Mm.
wow, what a story, what inspiration.
Mm.
Like, what do you think drove her into that entrepreneurship? You said she couldn't get the job.
Ah.
Did you
Hmm.
did you come over with papers, like as
Hmm.
in like you were a UK citizen,
Hmm.
or you had to like arrive and then set that up later?
Yeah.
Are you
So
a UK citizen, Ken?
yeah, I am. Yeah. Yeah. Thankfully today. Thankfully today I am. Yeah. But we basically moved here with our Nigerian passports. So you move here and
Okay.
you have to then seek um, residency. You have to try and
Yes.
apply and all those things. But it takes a very long time, and they just forget
Mm.
about you. And for us, they just forgot about us, and they basically said, "You can't work, you can't claim benefits, you can't do anything. But hey,
Oh
go and
God.
survive somehow." And so
No.
it was all about trying to figure life out. And like this is the thing about, like, I say to people a lot when I meet so many people in my world now, through comments, emails, like DMs, and and people tell me their problems, and I often think to myself, those are serious problems, yes, but like, if honestly, if I told you like where I've come from, you'd understand like that your future
Mm.
possibility is huge, like, and I think that's why a lot of the work when it comes to money and it comes to all these things is really mindset. It's really mindset. So a lot of the work is mindset, because I think if people have understood mindset, then they can build on their skill set, and then they can acquire the right tool set
Mm.
to actually create the life that they want, right? But the thing that underlies it, almost the foundation, is mindset. And for me, that has been the thing that I've acquired through experience and through like navigating life and figuring stuff out. And this is why the whole idea of like life design really suited me, because like I started to come across interesting blogs and all these various American blogs and things, and I'd think to myself, wow, like, you know a lot of these guys, like, they've actually done something quite incredible. How can I try and do the same thing?
Mm.
um so yeah, anyway, a lot of it's down to mindset.
And I think I'm fascinated by this. I remember going on a course many, many years ago, and it said like it's 80% mindset, 20% how do you do it. And I remember at the time going like, piss off, get lost. Like, I am doing it. I'm doing everything I can. Just tell me how to do it and I'll follow it. And I
Mm.
really didn't get it. And it's only years and years and years later that I'm starting to realize, okay, like actually it is, how do I positively wake up each day? How do I stay driven? How do I make things happen? How do I create the future of tomorrow? And all those
Mhm.
questions of staying positive.
Mhm.
But getting practical, like, how do you actually develop a positive mindset and stay positive despite what's
Mhm.
going on in the world? How do we do this, Ken?
Okay, so it's to answer that question, it's good to actually go back to how our mindsets are actually formed and stuff like that. So a lot of this is actually tied to almost the blueprint we were raised with. So in our
Mm,
formative years, um, the way we grew up mattered a lot. Actually, shaped who we become as young adults and stuff like that. So, for example, if your parents were like, "Oh, I do everything myself to save money," then you be that person who would, as a business owner, do everything yourself because you're trying to save money, right? So the way in which we start to almost remap or develop the right mindset and all those things is through a bunch of things. So one of them is through repetition. So if you look for evidence of success around you, and repeat what you're seeing, the chances are you will come close. You come close in terms of results to that evidence of success that you found. So, for example, say right now I wanted to create, making it up, I don't know, a business in a particular type of area, and I went and I started to hang around with people. I joined a group of people who maybe a group on online or offline or whatever, and I started to hang around with those people, and I started to repeat the patterns that I was seeing. The chances are my mindset will shift from I don't think I can do it to, well, actually there is a pathway to doing this, and I can see evidence of how you do it, and I'm going to try and implement what I'm seeing to see if I can get the same results. Okay, so repetition matters a lot. Another way when it comes to mindset is there is power, Alan, in words. I often say to
Mm-hmm.
people that words either build or words destroy. And
Mm.
I try to teach my kids this, that the words you put out matter a lot. And you know how I said to you that human beings are the only I guess species, or whatever, the only people in the world essentially, that can build futures, right? Um, the words we speak actually builds those futures, or it actually keeps us where we are or pushes us backwards. So if you keep saying to yourself, I'm really rubbish at this, you will actually stay rubbish at it. It's really that simple. If you keep saying to yourself, I'm getting a lot better at this, you will get better at it over time. So the word we project either builds us up or it keeps us back where we are. So for me, a big part of my mindset is I don't surround myself with people who utter negative words all the time. I just don't have time for that. I don't find it builds me. It just does nothing for me. So I just keep away from that negativity. Instead, when I surround myself with people who have an optimistic way of looking at life, who believe in problem solving, who believe in seeking out solutions, I find that I also want to do those things. My mindset's completely changed. I'm like, wow, like how do I figure this stuff out? And even if my day hasn't gone that well, I'm like, okay, do you know what? Tomorrow will be a better day. We're going to figure it out, and I focus on tomorrow to try and figure it out. So words, I'd say, is one that I hope everyone can kind of relate to in a way, um, as a way of doing that. And then a third one I might share might just be around behaviors and habits, because I've personally found that there are obviously behaviors that help you shift your mindset, and then there are behaviors that don't. So, for example, I wake up daily and do a 5 a.m. club. Now, you might go like, "What, Ken? Like, are you actually being serious? I should show up at 5 a.m." I'm like, "Yeah, I actually do. I log into my Zoom, and all my community members are on Zoom, and we're together at 5 a.m. and we read a book together, and we share stories together. But what that does, Alan, is it helps me shift my mindset. It helps me to, you know, shift away from my default, my old ways, which is that actually, I just stay in my duvet and like sleep till 7:30 and snooze my alarm 3 times, and then wake up the last minute, get up and then run and leg it and make it to the station. When in actual fact, well, actually, I want to begin my day with a completely radically different mindset. I want to feel like I'm ahead and to feel like I'm winning. So waking up and kind of changing my behavior and stuff like that, doing things that shift that behavior, help me to improve my mindset.
I love that. I'm going to introduce you to my friend Joel, who runs the 5 a.m. club, and you two can talk at 5 a.m.
Ah,
I will probably still be in bed at that point, having a rest. I'm a big fan of sleep, but I do absolutely agree with the setting those behaviors,
Mm,
and you're training yourself that you start the day positively, which I
mm.
think is the key message. Like, for everyone listening to this, it doesn't have to be at 5 a.m. It can be
No,
at
no.
whatever time you want to do it. But
Mm,
starting the day positively with those messages is phenomenal. And I think
yes.
that's one of the most critical pieces to building a positive mindset, is those habits that build that into your day, because it's
Mhm,
so easy to get dragged back down into the negative behavior and mindset. It's so easy to watch the latest series at night and end up
mhm,
thinking negatively.
mhm.
And I think, you said about the surround yourself with people that are positive and infectious.
Yeah.
I actually think part of that is the TV shows and the media we watch. So
Mhm.
before I say my theory, do you watch many TV shows, Ken?
So I'll tell you now, I'm actually very deliberate about what I listen to and what I let my eyes get exposed to. generally. So I listen to a lot of podcasts and I listen to Audible quite a lot. I
Mm.
like those resources. I also listen to YouTube when when I'm not working on YouTube. um, um, but TV shows, I have a habit of running away from shows that go on for too long. That want to suck me in and kind of keep me watching like back to back, back to back, back to back. I've fallen into the trap before a few times, but I prefer not to fall into that trap. So I prefer like documentaries. I quite like documentaries. They just speak to me slightly differently, and I like classic films. I like kind of going back and watching slightly older films because I just think they're better made and stuff like that. But yeah, apart from that, oh, and that's the other thing as well is when I think about movies, I always look for something I can learn from a film. If I watch a film, I always feel like
Mm.
films speak to me in so many ways. Like the film Gladiator, for example, one of my favorite films, uh, like ever. It's funny, like I don't know if it's because I'm quite a visual person in a way. When I watch a scene, like for example, I could watch the scene of I don't know Maximus fighting in the I don't know, call it Colosseum or in the auditorium thing. But I could relate that to budgeting. It's a weird thing, like the way my mind works. Like I could build an entire story from that scene I'm seeing in the movie. It's a weird thing, and maybe it's because I guess I don't know. I don't know. Just it's interesting when you geek out on something so much, you must relate so many things in your mundane life to the thing that you're working on. Like I could go for a walk and I could relate the fact that it's really sunny and like I don't know, like the trees are really like looking beautiful to something really random, like talking about investing. So I always find a way of connecting small details to what I'm working on. I just find it just makes things more interesting. But I want to hear your theory, Dave. What was your theory on like media and stuff like that?
Well, my theory is that the TV shows are part of who you surround yourself with. So, you say you like gravitate towards the five closest people to you.
Yeah.
If the five closest people to you are the people in the latest TV show that spend their entire life making huge mistakes and arguments, and you actually gravitate towards them. And I started watching, there was a latest series. It was about, I can't even remember the name of the series, about a young girl who started taking drugs, becoming a mess. And
Ah,
what our
okay.
friends were all recommending it, like it's out right now.
Interesting.
They were saying,
Okay.
you've got to watch this. And I watched the first episode and I'm like, this is all going wrong. This is the opposite, my love. I actually felt physically like I can't watch this. I don't want to watch this.
Hmm.
And I said to Katie, I can't watch this because other shows like uh, Coronation Street, EastEnders, it's just people
Hmm.
shouting at each other all the
Mhm.
time,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it it affects my psychology positively. It drags me
Mm.
down, and I think we should actually be starting to tell people like these are some of the five people you're spending time with. So if
Mhm.
you're spending your time with X character, they will affect your psychology and the way you operate as much as the real person that's next to you.
Do you know, it's interesting you say that. I think another one to kind of throw in the mix is social media. Like social media is actually a really interesting thing because it can work so well for you if you use it in the right way, but it can work so much against you as well if all you do is you're constantly in everybody's lives, like literally constantly, like everything about everybody. And I personally, I found personally in my own life that when I spend too much time on social media, it starts to affect me, like literally affects
Hmm.
my mood. And so I've come up with rules where I basically cut off. I put stuff out, but I don't sit constantly flicking any longer. There's an app on my phone called a Digital Wellbeing. It's on the Android. It's called Digital Wellbeing, and it got revealed to me once. Like when you check like how long you've been on these various apps, and I saw ones that in a day I must have spent at least 4 hours on one of the social platforms, and it really, really like you know when like something really shocks you so
Yes.
much that you go completely the other way.
Delete it.
Yeah.
Delete
So
it.
I
Yeah.
I started tracking everything now. I've become like ridiculously obsessed with just making sure that I'm not wasting my life on social media. You can put stuff on, but move on. Don't spend too much time on that.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you get rewarded for engagement. The more you engage
Yeah,
with people, the more
yeah,
they boost your posts, the more it
yeah.
goes places. It's really fascinating how the game tries to suck you in, which is their reward versus the other side. So, look, it's been an incredible journey chatting to you today. I really want to know, like, people who are out there trying to design their life,
Mhm,
build their life, create their life exactly as they want to. You've come so far
mhm.
on your journey, like arriving in the UK at 14 and becoming an accountant, becoming a CFO, completely changing direction and becoming a YouTuber and a blogger. Talk about a difference from using numbers to words.
Yeah.
You've made a huge shift. Um, and this year you're going to be a speaker at Chautauqua, which is so
Yes.
exciting. You're
Oh,
joining
I
us in
cannot wait.
Colombia.
Woohoo! I cannot wait. JL Collins, the whole crew. Listen, I cannot wait for that.
It's going to be awesome. We're so excited you're coming out to hang out. Like, your advice to people
Mm,
about creating the life you want, because one of the expressions of the show is the extraordinary belongs to those that create it.
yes.
What's your advice to people as they're on this journey, as they're going through what they're doing, to keep them going, to stay focused, to create? Maybe they haven't even started creating. Like, a lot of people who
Mhm,
listen to this are looking for inspiration to start
mhm.
the mini experiment. What's your advice to people on lifestyle design and creating as we wrap up this episode?
Wow, great question. So I'd say um, I often ask people, imagine that I gave you a blank sheet of A3 and I gave you a pencil and I asked you to draw that's the type of life you ideally want to be living or where you want to end up
Mm.
at. And some of the core questions I ask people are in the life that you're trying to build for yourself, what exactly are you doing in that life? Where are you living in that life? How much money are you making in that life? Who are you with in that life? Um, what is your typical day in that life? Like when you wake up to like when you go to bed, like what are you doing exactly? And so on. And the reason I ask that question is that it's not very often that we put our smartphones down and do an exercise like this one, where we are actually thinking about something that doesn't exist yet, a future that could become. You know how I said to you at the very beginning that tomorrow and every day that comes after is unclaimed land. So that exercise of actually trying to map out on an A3 sheet of paper is literally you creating the blueprint for the life that you might want to create for yourself. And this is something that absolutely anyone can do if they would put their smartphone down and actually do it. Yeah. Now, now, once you've done that piece of work, I have a framework that I often share with people. It's the POST framework. P stands for purpose, O stands for objectives, S stands for strategy, and T stands for tactics. Let me explain what I mean real quick. P for purpose means your why. That life that you want for yourself, why do you want it? What is your core desire? Like, what is the thing that's pushing you and nudging you to want that life? For example, is it because you want to spend more time with your spouse? Is it because you'd love to travel? Is it because you want to raise your children whilst also being present and not constantly being late for pickups? Like, what is it that's driving you for wanting that life that you want? Because that why then decides everything else that will follow. Out of that why is then a question of the O, the objectives. What is the goal that you need to aim for in order to achieve that purpose you've set out? The objective needs to be very clear. For example, is it $1 million by the year 2030, the 31st of December? Or is it £750,000 by the next 7 years on a particular date? What is it that will get you there? What is it you're aiming for? Is it your health? Are you trying to maybe lose 10 kilos by a certain date? Is it your relationship? Do you want to say to yourself, do you know what? I want to do a date night every week, or I want to, I want to maybe go out running once a week. Like, what are those specific objectives that you need from all those dimensions of your life that you drew out on that sheet of paper, that you need to be very clear on are the things you are trying to achieve? The reason this is important is that it stops you being distracted by everybody else. There's so much noise out there. You scroll on Instagram, you suddenly think you want that life that somebody else has. When in actual fact, what you need is the life that you truly want to design, not the life that somebody else is living out, possibly based on somebody else's life that they've seen, right? So having that clear objective really puts you in your lane. And this is, again, a mindset thing, because you need to realize that your neighbor buying a BMW has nothing to do with you at all. Okay? Because you have got your own goals and you need to focus on those goals and live them out, because they are deep-rooted on that purpose that you had talked about earlier. And then out of those objectives, you then build strategy. Because out of strategy tells you your how. So the strategy is, should I be investing in stock market? Should I buy index funds or ETFs? Should I start a side hustle? Should I go down to a 4-day week so that I can use my 5th day to work on my business? This is all strategy. Because the strategy builds your objectives builds the purpose. And then the tactics, the T, are then the small steps. Say your fitness levels are not very good. A tactic could be, I put my running shoes by my bedside so that I can wake up, put those running shoes on, and actually go and do it. A tactic could be, I actually go to bed at 9:30 instead of binging Ozarks till 12:30 in the morning, and then I can't wake up and go and do the running that I wanted to do. Those are tactics. So when you then combine all those elements, the purpose, the objectives, the strategy, the tactics, those all together help you to design the life you truly want.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And one of the things I've been realizing recently, and I say the extraordinary is built by those who create it. The extraordinary is created by the mundane actions you do every day. Because it sounds like an extraordinary future getting to the business, the FI, the whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But it's involved with the daily actions of making a call, getting up early, having one less alpha hordes per day so that you're not as fat. I might be speaking to myself there. But those daily things are where the rubber meets the road. Mm-hmm. Ken, you've been fabulous. I've loved this episode. I've loved your energy, your beaming smile.
I've enjoyed it.
It's been brilliant. So thehumblepenny.com is where people go to find the blog.
Yes.
The YouTube channel has absolutely taken off recently. Where can people see more of your content on YouTube? Do they just search Humble Penny?
Just search The Humble Penny on YouTube, or go to youtube.com/The Humble Penny. That just takes you straight to the YouTube channel, where we put out 2 pieces of content per week, one every Tuesday and one every Thursday, typically around 4 p.m. BST, thereabouts. So
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on the show. To everyone listening to this, there has never been a better time to start building the life you want to live. Mm-hmm. So please take the tools, tips, techniques, the ideas, and the posts and go out there and build the life of your dreams. Thank you for listening to The Rebel Entrepreneur. You can have any life you want to. Choose to build something cool. Choose to take action. Choose to work to make your dreams become reality. Stand out. Be different. Be yourself. Be a rebel entrepreneur.